Today's story has a twist so mind-boggling that it's difficult to imagine. And what's even more heartbreaking is how none of the individuals involved could have foreseen the impending tragedy. The tale I'm about to unfold will leave you questioning every unfamiliar face you pass by. Back in 2017, the main suspect in a horrific and cold-blooded crime simply disappeared, leaving behind a trail of clues that, even today, has not led to an arrest. This chilling case will undoubtedly have you rethinking how well you know those around you. On June 19, 2017, the police were called to a modest farmhouse in Idaho for a welfare check. The house was home to a 60-year-old man, his 47-year-old partner, and her teenage daughter. The family had recently moved in, full of excitement for their new life, but strangely, no one had heard from them for days. Something was off. The first officer to arrive was immediately overwhelmed by a stench, one that unmistakably signaled something was terribly wrong. The putrid smell seemed to be coming from a shed on the property, so the officer called for backup before cautiously approaching the source of the odor. The closer he got to the shed, the stronger the smell became, and swarms of flies buzzed ominously around him. His gut told him he was about to uncover something dreadful. Upon opening the shed door, sunlight illuminated a blue tarp draped over what appeared to be bodies. As he pulled the tarp back, the officer uncovered the lifeless forms of 3 people, their bodies having decomposed in the summer heat, making it almost impossible to identify them. Naturally, it seemed likely that these were the remains of the home's occupants, Mike, his partner Nadia, and her daughter Peyton. But when authorities finally identified the bodies, they were shocked to discover that one did not belong to any of the home's residents. This raised 2 harrowing questions. Who was this unknown individual? And perhaps even more terrifying, where was the missing 3rd resident? As investigators pieced together the puzzle, loved ones came to a disturbing realization. No matter how well you think you know someone, you can never be entirely sure what hidden secrets they might harbor. Let's rewind to the beginning. Nadia Medley was a devoted mother to her 13-year-old daughter Peyton. Life hadn't been easy for Nadia, especially after her husband passed away in 2014, followed by the heartbreaking loss of a child. For a time, it was just Nadia and Peyton against the world. Nadia, a massage therapist in Ogden, Utah, wasn't looking for love when she met Mike in 2015. He was a charismatic man with a larger-than-life personality who had come to her for a massage. Sparks flew instantly, and soon the two were inseparable. Mike was a private pilot who traveled frequently for work. He was financially stable, having been divorced for 10 years, and seemed like the perfect match for Nadia. Their relationship blossomed, and before long, Mike had become a father figure to Peyton. He bonded with her, picking her up from school, taking her on outings, and even teaching her how to handle firearms. Their bond grew so strong that Peyton began calling him Dad. Videos of the trio show a happy family, adventuring together and making cherished memories. Nadia's friends noticed a positive change in her demeanor after she met Mike. He seemed to bring light back into her life. The couple often shared their joy on social media, posting about trips to concerts and national parks. Nadia's posts were filled with expressions of love and gratitude toward Mike. However, beneath the surface of their seemingly perfect relationship, tensions began to simmer. Nadia and Mike had their fair share of disagreements, particularly over finances. Mike made a good living but was reluctant to help Nadia financially, which led to a temporary separation. Despite the strain, their bond proved too strong to break, and they quickly reconciled. In an effort to solidify their future together, Mike purchased a ranch in Caldwell, Idaho, and invited Nadia and Peyton to move in with him. The move was meant to be the start of their new life, filled with love and promise. Nadia was thrilled, dedicating her time to transforming the ranch into a home for their family. She shared updates online, showcasing her excitement about the open fields, the animals, and the new chapter in their lives. But as we know, this dream turned into a nightmare. In June of 2017, Nadia left for Utah to pick up horses Mike had purchased, but she never arrived. Concerned friends and family members noticed that communication from both Nadia and Peyton had abruptly stopped. After repeated attempts to contact them failed, they called the police to conduct a welfare check, leading to the grisly discovery in the shed. The identity of the third body and the whereabouts of the missing resident would soon unravel a tale of deception and double lives that no one saw coming. As investigators dug deeper, they uncovered secrets that shattered the illusion of a perfect family and left everyone questioning just how well they really knew the people involved. Eventually, the officers managed to identify the mysterious third body through dental records. The deceased was Cheryl Baker, a local from Ogden, Utah. But despite Cheryl's proximity to the area, she had no known connection to Nadia or Peyton while alive. So why was her body found on their property? Well, it turns out that Cheryl wasn't linked to Nadia or Peyton, but she was very much connected to Mike. In fact, Mike's real name was Gerald Michael Bullinger, and Cheryl Baker was his wife of 7 years before her tragic demise. You heard that correctly. Gerald had been married to Cheryl for 5 whole years before he even began dating Nadia. Not only had Gerald been living a double life by starting a new family with Nadia, but his 2 homes were only 8 miles apart, making it incredibly easy for him to maintain the deception without raising suspicion. Nadia's friends always found it peculiar that she didn't spend many nights with Gerald, and one of her closest friends recalled that Nadia had only stayed over at his place once. But they assumed he was just being cautious since he said it was his first relationship in a decade. Little did they know, Gerald was juggling 2 entire lives. To make matters even more twisted, Gerald didn't even have the funds to buy the ranch where he had moved in with Nadia and Peyton. It was actually Cheryl who had purchased the property for him, thinking it was going to be their retirement home. Cheryl, a passionate and creative woman, had big dreams for the property, even planning to turn the shed into an art studio. So, when she decided to surprise Gerald with an impromptu visit in June 2017 after retiring from her job as a teacher, she could never have imagined the nightmare she was about to walk into. When Cheryl arrived at the property, she must have been confused to find a fully functioning home with animals roaming around. This was supposed to be her property, but she hadn't been working on it. As she approached the house, it's likely that she expected to find some renovations underway, perhaps even believing Gerald had arranged it all as a surprise. But when Nadia opened the door, the truth likely hit both women like a ton of bricks. Gerald had been playing them both. The details of what happened after Cheryl and Nadia's confrontation remain unclear, but investigators believe that once Gerald realized his double life was exposed, he snapped. Overcome by rage and desperation, Gerald allegedly turned violent. The tragic outcome left Nadia, her daughter Peyton, and his wife Cheryl unalived, their bodies discovered later in the shed, each having been unalived with a fire weapon to the head. In addition to the human victims, several of the animals on the property were found unalived as well, adding another horrifying layer to the case. While some pets were still alive, others, including dogs and birds, were found unalived, also unalived execution style. The chilling discovery devastated the victims' families, who were left to grapple with the reality that they had been entangled in Gerald's massive deception. Cheryl's relatives later revealed that Gerald had shown no signs of pulling away from his marriage while he was secretly involved with Nadia. He continued to participate in family holidays and outings, giving no hint of his hidden life. It's staggering to think that someone could maintain such a perfect facade for so long. Cheryl's brother summed it up best when he said, "I don't know what his plans could have been. Just pick one and tell the other to go home. You don't unalive them." One of the many mysteries surrounding Gerald's actions is what his ultimate plan had been. Some speculate that he may have been hoping to keep both lives separate indefinitely, but promising both women the same house was a ticking time bomb. Another theory is that Gerald was waiting for Cheryl to sell their home in Ogden, which was in her name, so he could cash in on the money and leave her for Nadia. Despite his career as a private pilot, Gerald seemed to struggle financially. Nadia had seen his paychecks, which showed he made a substantial income, but he often refused to help her out with expenses. It raises the question of whether Gerald was even working as much as he claimed. Balancing time with both women may have meant his flying hours were lower on his priority list. Interestingly, some theorize that Gerald might have been trying to merge his 2 relationships into a single polygamous arrangement, though it seems unlikely that either woman would have agreed to such a proposal. There's also conflicting information about Gerald's religious beliefs. While Nadia's friend claimed that both she and Gerald were atheists, Cheryl and Gerald were reportedly active members of a Hindu temple. Meanwhile, other reports suggested Gerald had told Nadia he was a Mormon from Montana. Gerald's history of deceit goes back even further. His first wife, Jackie Garcia, whom he met at Brigham Young University, described him as an expert manipulator. From the very beginning of their marriage, Jackie said she felt something was off, and after years of infidelity and abuse, she divorced him in 1988. After their divorce, Gerald quickly moved on to another relationship, a pattern that would repeat itself with Cheryl and Nadia. For both Nadia and Cheryl, it was a terrible coincidence that their lives tragically intersected at the same time. Yet, one can't help but wonder if Cheryl had her suspicions. In a haunting last message to a friend, Cheryl wrote, "Take care of my dogs. I don't know if I'm coming back." At the time, this didn't raise alarms, as the recipient assumed Cheryl might be heading on one of her frequent backpacking trips with Gerald. But with the sad events that followed, that message takes on a much darker tone. Did Cheryl sense that something wasn't right before heading to the property? Or, as some have speculated, was the message even sent by Cheryl at all? Could Gerald have sent it after her passing away to divert suspicion? While it's unlikely Gerald would go out of his way to send a text that might raise concerns, especially given his apparent disregard for life, including his pets, it's possible. CBS reported that the text was sent on June 11th, days after authorities believe the crime took place on June 8th or 9th. If true, Gerald may have used Cheryl's phone to cover his tracks, adding another layer of manipulation to this already twisted case. What's even more perplexing is how Gerald managed to juggle his double life with Nadia so publicly. Despite the close proximity of their homes, Nadia frequently posted pictures and updates of her life with Gerald, from concerts and rodeos to hikes. One would think that, in this digital age, someone, a mutual friend or even a passerby, would have noticed. But Gerald seemed unfazed, possibly counting on Cheryl's limited social media activity and the fact that Nadia referred to him only as Mike in her posts. The most frustrating part? Gerald had a 10-day head start before anyone even noticed Nadia, Peyton, or Cheryl were missing. Investigators believe he lingered in Idaho for 24 hours after committing the horrific crime, possibly sleeping in the very farmhouse while the bodies of his victims lay just yards away in the shed. A neighbor later recalled hearing screams around the time of the murders but dismissed it, thinking it might have been an animal or assuming that closer neighbors would report it if it was something serious. Fire weapon shots were also heard, but in this rural area, such noises were common and hardly raised suspicion. Though the unaliving occurred in a remote location, the homes were close enough that it's surprising no one noticed anything unusual. Perhaps the dense trees, which Nadia had once appreciated for their privacy, ended up masking the horror unfolding behind them. Based on the victim's manner of unaliving, it's believed there wasn't much of a struggle. Each person was unalived from a single, precise fire weapon shot wound to the head, indicating a cold, calculated execution. The timeline raises numerous questions. Whether Gerald was present when Cheryl arrived or returned later to find both women, it's difficult to imagine the scene wasn't chaotic. Could he really have subdued all three victims so easily? Some theorize he may have unalived Nadia and Peyton first, possibly while they were asleep, before lying in wait for Cheryl to arrive. This scenario could explain the scream the neighbor heard, but the exact details remain unclear. On June 10th, a day after the crime, Gerald was seen casually getting breakfast in a nearby town, Nampa, Idaho. Despite the horrors he had committed, he appeared calm, even unbothered, showing no signs of urgency to flee. From there, he returned to Utah, switched out his truck for Cheryl's car, which had been in for repairs, and made his way to Wyoming. On June 11th, Gerald was captured on video entering Bridger Teton National Forest, marking the last time he was definitively seen. Authorities later found Cheryl's car abandoned at a campsite, but Gerald was nowhere to be found. Speculation about his fate runs wild. Some believe he may have hitchhiked his way out of the forest and disappeared, while others suspect he may have unalived himself. Canyon County Sheriff Kieran Donahue has expressed his belief that Gerald is likely unalived, though whether from intentional self-injury or the elements remains unknown. Many online commentators have expressed frustration over law enforcement speculation that Gerald Bullinger might be dead. These netizens argue that if he had intended to unalive himself, he would likely have done so immediately after committing the crime, rather than fleeing the scene. Friends of Nadia have also pointed out that Gerald was too egotistical to consider such an act. One individual, who had known Gerald for over a decade, remarked, "If you know about sociopaths, you know they're unlikely to unalive themselves. He would have to feel guilt, and he doesn't have a conscience." This brings up the question of whether Gerald might fit the definition of a sociopath. The term is often casually thrown around, but the behaviors associated with sociopathy include a lack of empathy, impulsive actions, manipulation through charm, and a refusal to learn from mistakes. Gerald exhibited many of these traits throughout his life, making it reasonable to conclude that he displayed sociopathic tendencies. His ability to charm Cheryl so thoroughly, to the point that they exchanged numbers on a plane and later married, demonstrates how he used his personality to manipulate and control those closest to him. As law enforcement pointed out, the area where Gerald disappeared, Bridger Teton National Forest, is a vast, rugged 3.4 million-acre wilderness home to grizzly bears, wolves, and other dangers. Although Gerald had experience with survival training, surviving in such conditions long-term, especially as winter approached, would have been incredibly difficult. Interestingly, some of Gerald's old friends believe he may have used his charm to convince someone to shelter him. If he's alive, he's likely living under an alias, making spreading his photo essential in helping the public stay vigilant. What's even more shocking are the reported sightings of Gerald after he entered the forest. Just 9 days later, workers at a recreation center claimed to have seen someone matching his description at a nearby campsite. Another tip reported seeing him driving near Salt Lake City, while others thought they spotted him in Pocatello. Despite the extensive manhunt involving police dogs, helicopters, and infrared technology, Gerald has evaded capture, leaving behind more questions than answers. What's truly perplexing is that one sheriff claimed they had evidence suggesting Gerald was dead, yet that information hasn't been publicly released. If this is the case, many are left wondering what exactly led them to that conclusion, especially since Gerald's body has never been found. Adding to the emotional weight of this case, Nadia's social media pages remain online. Her posts from the months leading up to the tragedy paint a heartbreaking picture of a woman full of optimism, deeply in love, and excited for the future. Her final post captures the contentment she felt in her life. "Life is good." A previous post, celebrating Father's Day in 2016, reflected how much she and her daughter Peyton had embraced Gerald into their lives. Happy Father's Day to all the real dads out there. Tragically, Nadia had no idea that the man she saw as her second chance at love was secretly living a double life with his wife Cheryl, ultimately leading to the horrifying events that took her and her daughter's lives. The disappearance of Gerald Michael Bullinger remains one of the most chilling unresolved cases, with him still being the only person of interest in the murders of Nadia, Peyton, and Cheryl. If alive, Gerald is considered armed and dangerous, and authorities have urged the public to stay alert. At the last sighting, he was described as a Caucasian male in his 60s, about 6 feet tall, weighing around 240 pounds, with gray hair and brown eyes. As we conclude this unsettling tale of deception and tragedy surrounding Gerald Mike Bullinger, we're reminded that sometimes the most familiar faces can conceal the darkest secrets. The unanswered questions and lingering mystery of his disappearance leave a haunting mark on all those touched by this case. If you found this story compelling and want to delve into more true crime mysteries, please subscribe to our channel, hit the notification bell, and join us for more stories that will keep you on the edge of your seat. Thank you for watching and stay vigilant out there.